Ajahn. Thank you for your Dhamma talks. Since listening to your teachings, I've noticed an improvement with my practice. My body seems to feel calmer and somewhat brighter. I also feel heat around my body. I really do enjoy these experiences. I've been practicing by myself for around 25 years, and before I came across your talks, I struggled a lot without knowing or understanding what I was doing and what was happening to me. I had no one to talk to about the experiences and dreams I had or whether they were just my imaginations. I had always wanted to understand an experience I had many years ago. So may I please ask if the experience I had was in line with the Dhamma, or maybe it was just my imagination. I was chanting with my eyes closed for an hour or so, the compassionate mantra, where suddenly I felt the room that I was in started to dissolve inwards towards me, and then I felt my body dissolving inwards. And then it all exploded outwards. The first thing I was aware of was space. It felt infinite, like there was no beginning or no ending. Next thing I noticed was that I wasn't there, but there was something there at the same time, like I didn't exist, but there was existence at the same time. I then noticed the absence of one thing, like it was no longer there. I then heard a voice saying, "I am home," followed by the bliss that was so amazing that I have no words to describe it. I ask this because whenever I have desire in my heart causing me to suffer, I think back to that experience to help me let go of my desire. If it was my imagination, then I will discard it. Thank you, and sorry for my long-winded question.
So, firstly, Nampa wishes to express his anumodana, the joy that he takes in the practice of the person who asked this question, that you've been practicing for 25 years and being intent on listening to the Dhamma frequently. And so this experience of Dhamma that you did experience, it shows that that came from the efforts that you put into your practice, into cultivating your mind, and that you're able to know this happiness. Because all of us, we already know the happiness that comes from sights and sounds and tastes, smells, tactile sensations, thoughts. We already know what those are like. And we may get those kinds of pleasures, but they don't give us any peace of mind. We don't get the peace of samadhi. And we also know the happiness that comes from generosity, the happiness that comes from keeping precepts. These are kinds of happiness that are higher still. And then there's the happiness that comes from bhavana, from mental cultivation. That which comes from abandoning the greed, hatred, and delusion in our hearts. And whenever there's hatred or ill will, and we're able to forgive those people, then we feel a happiness within our hearts. Because we know how this ill will, this anger, it makes our hearts agitated and hot. The same is true for greed, that aggravates the heart, this delusion about me and mine, delusion about all the things that we get deluded in. These bring heat to the heart. So to conclude, greed, hatred, and delusion, they agitate, they aggravate the heart. They make it unsettled, and we don't experience true happiness due to them. But when we train in samadhi, then a happiness from peace arises within our hearts. And we see that the mind, it's not so unsettled, it's not so worried. And there's no wanting to have, no wanting to be, there's no drowsiness there, no ill will there, and the mind is bright and cool. And joy nourishes the heart at this point, bringing a sense of inner contentment. And so all of us have probably experienced this to some degree from our practice before. And this is a kind of resting place for our hearts. It's a home for the heart, this home of samadhi. And Venerable Ajahn Chah, he once asked his monks and novices, do you have a resting place yet. And what he was talking about was the heart, this resting place for the heart, samadhi. And when we practice to the point of vipassana, insight or clear knowing, perhaps the state of the Dhamma appears. You can see the body as just being composed of these four elements, and we see that dissolve into emptiness, just like how you explained in your question. You see all things as being empty, and then they may come together again, and then they dissolve all over again back into emptiness, until greed, hatred, and delusion kind of leave. And there's this emptiness, which is boundless, which is empty, which is endless. But there's still a knowing there, there's still awareness in that state. And so this is the state of the Dhamma that you're experiencing. And you're gaining a taste of that. You know the flavor of the Dhamma from the practice that you are doing, and and you also know the flavor of the purity of the mind and the purity of emptiness, that all things are empty, and this emptiness is Buddha, is this nature of awakening. So may you recollect this state and this experience frequently, the state of Nibbana. And when you recollect this often, then your mind will come to peace and joy will come up. And it's like you're gaining a home for your heart. You're able to rest your heart in samadhi, or rest your heart in emptiness and in wisdom, in panya. Whenever the heat of greed, hatred, and delusion arises, then you should bring up mindfulness and recollect that you've met with emptiness before, and you've already tasted this coolness and this peace. So may you bring up that as an object for your mind, that coolness and peace, and do that frequently. So whenever that happens, whenever these defilements come up, then recollect Nibbana as the object of your heart. So Nibbana exists, but the people who enter Nibbana don't exist. There's no one who enters Nibbana. So Nibbana is something that's very subtle. And the mind needs to be void of a sense of self, of I and them, in order to be able to enter Nibbana. So therefore, what you described, this is not a dream. This is the state of Dhamma that you're experiencing. This is a home that you have reached, and an incredible happiness that you've experienced. It's something that you just can't describe. There aren't any words to describe it with. And when this arises, then there's a happiness and a joy in the heart that there's nothing in the world that you can compare it to. There's nothing in the world that's like it. And this has come up from your efforts of 25 years of practice, from sitting in meditation often. And this is the results that have come up. So may you recollect this frequently and use this as an object for your heart, and do it until you're skilled at that recollection. So do that a lot, develop that a lot. And then your mind will have this true happiness, a genuine home. And so it's like you've reached a home in that state. The home that you have now, and externally, that's a temporary home. You need to be born and then go through old age, sickness, and death. The house of this body is just a temporary house. It needs to decay. And even in the Deva realms, the Brahma realms, where there's a lot of skillfulness and merit, but that's still just a temporary state. These are the realms of happiness. And if one is born lower than a human, then those are the realms of suffering, but they too are temporary. And so that's a temporary suffering that they experience. The heavens, the Brahma realms, that's a temporary happiness, but none of this lasts long. But the true home that we gain is that of Nibbana. And this is something that we can experience, can meet with, this Nibbana, this true home. But you're not yet able to stay there. So now what you need to do is to know that and to bring up a lot of effort to be very, very mindful and recollect this object frequently. This emptiness that you've experienced that had no bounds, where there was no self, no being, no individual, no you, no other. Where there was no liking, no disliking. And so if this comes up, liking and disliking arise, then tell yourself that's not sure, and then re-establish your mind. And back to this feeling that you explained, that of emptiness without limits, this fullness of genuine happiness that you experienced. And so do that frequently. And if you do that frequently, then you will reach the end of suffering. So may you set your heart on this.
This is the second question from the first person who asked. He's from United Kingdom, Mang Kai Hui. Dear Ajahn, may I ask a second question? I'm asking on behalf of my mother, who, when meditating with her eyes closed, sometimes see things, such as seeing a recently deceased person she once knew, and sometimes seeing people with animal heads. She does get scared, but recite the Heart Sutra and the compassion mantra for them and wishing them well. They start looking better and then leave, and my mother then goes back to her meditation or goes to bed. Is this the right thing to do, or should my mother ignore what she sees as it could be her imagination and just continue with the meditation? Thank you.
So sometimes when cultivating samadhi, one may see images of different things come up. There may be beings, bodies of people, but with the heads of a cow or of an elephant or a dog. And this may be the mind or a spirit which is coming to ask for merit. So when we chant, then we spread metta, and the mind enters into samadhi. We chant the Heart Sutra, or if it's Theravada, we chant or recollect Ita Pachiyata, this dependent arising of Dhamma, that avijja gives rise to sankhara, its conditions. This goes on to vijnana, sense consciousness, then physicality, mentality. And this goes on until craving, clinging, becoming, birth, and suffering. So by chanting this, or by reflecting on this, what we're doing is reflecting on not self. And when we contemplate the Dhamma, then the heart may come to peace. Perhaps you chant the chant that you talked about before, about the Maha Karunika Sutta and the Heart Sutra. And this is recollecting the great compassion and metta, loving kindness of the bodhisattvas who are cultivating barami, and what the barami they cultivate in each life. So by doing that, one's own mind gains compassion and kindness, and then we can spread that out towards all beings, wishing that they don't harm each other and they don't come to annoy us. But if they want goodness, then we can give them goodness, and then come back and cultivate our samadhi, and then use that to contemplate so that we can reach emptiness. So it's not wrong to do that. Or perhaps when we sit in meditation, before sitting in meditation, if we know that this is going to happen, then we can chant the Heart Sutra or Chanti Tipiso or the reflection on the 32 parts, recollecting kindness and the compassion of all the bodhisattvas, of the barami that they have created. And this brings the mind to peace. And then we spread that metta towards all beings, bringing our own minds to peace, and may they have peace as well. And may no beings harm each other. And we can recollect and think about the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, cultivate metta, and develop samadhi. So may you do this, so that it's something that you kind of habitually do when you practice.
The next question is from Nachi from India. How to overcome tightness around the temple region in the head during meditation?
So when practicing meditation, if we control the breath too much, then this can give rise to pain or aches in the temple region. And so doing that too much focus has an effect on the body. So need to be careful here and get things just right, in a sense, state of balance. To not be too intent, to not focus too much, until that becomes the cause for aches to arise. So rather just know what's happening, that you can observe that when you don't sit in meditation, your breath comes in and out, but there's nothing really that happens. There's no aches that come up from that. But when you sit to meditate, and then you immediately control the breath. So just let that go first. It's like you're not meditating, you're just sitting there. You're just sitting there and happening to be aware of the in and out breath. And maybe no aches will come up from that. So you should observe as well what happens, that if when you come to be aware of the breath, and then there's aches, then you can count along with the breath. So on the in-breath, you can count 1, on the out-breath 1, then the next in-breath 2, then out-breath 2, and keep counting in pairs until you reach 5. And come back to the first pair, in 1, out 1, until you get to the 6th pair, and then come back again and go to the 7th pair. And can see whether there's pain when you do that. Or you can try counting in a different way. So on the in-breath, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the out-breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So kind of focused on the breath. Because if there's that real staring at the breath, focusing too much, then that's not right. So in the practice of cultivating samadhi, things need to be in balance. And when samadhi arises, then your body will feel relaxed. There'll be peace in your mind. There won't be stress. So you do need to be a bit cautious in your practice here.
Dear Ajahn, while sleeping, I was attacked by a dark, strong gush of energy around 3+ in the night twice, and I couldn't move my body or speak. Then I focused my thoughts on reciting Putto, Dhammo, Sangho. It went away. Another time, I focused my thoughts and said, "Don't disturb me, I share the merits of my dana with you," and it went away and never came back. Can you advise me on what to do if I experience this again, as it was a very scary experience? Thank you.
So this is experience that you have is probably a spirit, mind, which is coming, which wishes to gain merit and skillfulness from you. And so it's like the energy or the current of their mind is coming, which makes you not be able to move. So in Thai they call it pi. It's like a poltergeist, I think in English. And so this is an experience which Tan Ajahn Anan has had as well. There was one time he hadn't yet ordained that he was meditating in a monastery, and he was staying in just a very small hut. And while he was meditating, he wasn't able to move his body. And then he saw, like a young child, a boy 10 years old, who was wearing a student's uniform, was standing in front of him. And so that time he was keeping the 8 precepts. He wasn't yet ordained, Ajahn Anan, but he wasn't afraid because he was cultivating samadhi. So he thought that he would try to kind of touch this spirit or this boy. So he went to touch his leg. But when he opened up his eyes, then he was touching his own leg. But he saw this boy very clearly. So afterwards, he went to ask around, was there anything that happened around this area? And he got the answer that before there was a child, a boy, a student who had died in a pool of water there. So may you train your mind so it can get into a state of samadhi, and there's no need to be afraid. Even though fear may come up, have mindfulness and try to chant, or maybe recite Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, spread metta, and then this spirit should go. But sometimes you chant and it doesn't go, so just recite Buddha, and maybe recollecting the Buddha, that will be enough for it to leave. So there's one story that Ajahn liked to tell, that there was a monk who had an experience like this, that he wasn't able to move his body. He spread metta, but the spirit wouldn't go. And then he tried to chant many different verses, but he wasn't yet very proficient at that chanting. And so he made many mistakes. But when he kind of made these mistakes, then the spirit would correct him and would carry on chanting. And in the end, he just came back to Buddha, and then the spirit left. So may you establish your mindfulness well and not be afraid. And before sleeping, really make your mindfulness firm. Chant beforehand, spread metta to all beings, that may we not be in a cycle of vengeance towards one another, and may we not annoy or harm each other.
About the 6th precept about 2 meals. Does Vikala Bhojana mean 2 meals only? Out of the 2 meals, can we have the second meal around 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. instead of before noon? Because of severe acidity, I have to eat something in the evening.
Precept, Vikala Bhojana. So that doesn't mean just taking 2 meals. But what it means is not eating after midday. So if you can have a meal at 6 a.m., another one at 9 a.m., another one at 12, that's fine. So there's no limit to the number of meals, but it's just not eating after midday. But the question you're asking, it's about your health. So that health isn't so good. It may be necessary, perhaps for some people, to take medicines along with food. So in that case, then they shouldn't take this 6th precept. And but in order to stop having many things to worry about or think about, you can just have 2 meals. So they can eat in the morning, and then maybe in the late afternoon, 4 p.m., 5 p.m. It's just so that there's some food there in the body, so that the acid isn't excessive. Because if you get problems with your health, then that will give you difficulties. So you need to be observant of the state of your body as well. Also, some people, they work, and that kind of can give some problem as well. So for Tan Ajahn Anan, that before that he was working but had the desire to keep these 8 precepts. But in the 8 precepts it says that you have to be finished eating before 12. He wasn't able to do that because the lunch break from his work was from 12 to 1. So he just limited himself to 2 meals, but wouldn't eat after 1. And he did that for the practice. That's why we do it, so that there's, in the stomach, it's empty in the evening, and that makes it more convenient to practice. And in the evening, you can also have certain drinks like cocoa or some sweet drinks. But if one has chronic illnesses, we need to look at the state of their body and to take care of their body so that more illnesses don't come up, because that will just make meditation inconvenient.